Who's ready to learn about fundraising climate change? I hope all of you. I'm going to stop looking at the chat window now and let's get this show on the road. Yeah, today, everybody, I want to thank you all for joining us. This is an annual presentation that I've been doing now, I think, for 8 years. And I coined this term, gosh, I guess it was a little more than 8 years ago, fundraising climate change, when I wanted to put a term, together with what I saw was happening in the sector. And it's this slow creeping change that was hard for people to put their fingers on. But I think by now, pretty much, it's been 8 years we've been doing this. I think by now a lot of folks in the sector really get it. And so we're gonna talk about what's happening, but we're also going to talk about what you can do about it. I am, by the way, your presenter. I'm Greg Warner. I'm the CEO and founder of MarketSmart. And I'm also the author of a book called Engagement Fundraising. I'm also the inventor of a couple other tools and a bunch of free items that I give away. One of them is called the DAF widget, which you can get at dafwidget.com, which makes it easier for you to get more DAF gifts, donor advised funds gifts. That's a free tool. Also, the Fundraising Report Card, which is where we get our data from, and I'll give you a URL and everything for that. But that's another part of my philanthropy where I like to develop these free tools, obviously, and give away as much as I can for free to help the sector. And in fact, my book, if you want a copy or an audio book or a digital version, we'll just give it to you. You don't have to go up and buy it. A lot of people like to buy it. We don't have hard copy. Well, maybe we do have hard copies, but if you reach out to us, we can send you whatever format you want for free. All right, so as we get into this, what we're going to do, it's really going to be two parts here. We're going to get into a lot of dizzying data. It might seem like overload. I'm going to be coming at you really fast with a whole bunch of data points. Don't worry, the slides and the recording will be sent to you. Everything that is not from our data set here at MarketSmart from the Fundraising Report Card has a hyperlink to where I found the data. So you can go on a deeper dive, if you will, on your own to look at any of these data points. But after we get through that data, then I'm going to give you 3 strategies for how to combat fundraising climate change. I don't want this to be all doom and gloom. And I almost cringe at the fact that the first half of this event might be quite a downer. So we're going to finish the event by talking about what is what you can do about fundraising climate change. All right, so don't worry, have no fear, and let's get it rolling. We're gonna come out swinging, talking about shrinking donor base. And by the way, I won't be taking or answering questions throughout the presentation. Rather, I'll reserve that for the very end. And in fact, sandwiched between this presentation and the question and answer session, I'll give y'all a 1-2 on what MarketSmart does, just in case anybody is curious and might want to consider, working with us. All right. All right, so let's jump into it and come out swinging with looking at shrinking donor base. Before I get to the fundraising report card data, and interspersed throughout, I'll be looking at other data sets to round out the story about what's happening for this term, fundraising climate change. So many of you, I'm sure, are aware of the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and their annual report. I'm going back a ways to looking at some data that they provided that looked, although it came out in 2021, I don't know why it only showed 2000 to 2018, but here it is that it used to be over almost 25 years ago that 2/3 of Americans gave to charity, but that's now dropped below 50%. Most of that drop and decline happened after the Great Recession of 2008 or 2007, 2009. So it's not exactly like you could average it and say it's 1.5% a year drop, but it's really most of it happened after the Great Recession. Now, this is perplexing because you would think that, well, the population is increasing. So if the population's increasing, even if the share of people is going down, maybe the increased population would make up for that, and we would not see a decline in giving. And we actually haven't been seeing a decline in giving for quite a while. Part of that is because the over 65 population is moving into their prime giving years, which is really good for nonprofits, frankly. Um, and of course, this great transfer of wealth, which we've been waiting for many years, is finally supposed to be starting to kick in, hopefully. Um, but the report also found that while donors are disappearing, the average amount that they're giving to charity is declining. So that doesn't bode well for things. We're looking at a 28.4% drop in the average total amount, yearly annual amount that people are giving to charity. That's a heavy decline, frankly. And like I said just a minute ago, giving, well, it was rising. It was rising each year. And for those of you who follow the Giving Institute report, interestingly, they came out in 2021 saying that it was 485 billion, but then they adjusted that up later. I'm not sure why, but it was adjusted up. And then in 2022, their result was that Americans gave 499 billion. So that amounted to a decrease of almost 3.5% compared to 2021's adjusted number. And when you factor in inflation, it's actually a decrease of 10.5%. So that's kind of striking. Of course, we've got this calamity of inflation that's happening that's making things harder and contributing to this fundraising climate change. So we've got that 3.5% or so decline and the 10.5% after adjusting for inflation. So let's see what other pieces we can put together. And the good folks at the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, which I think now is aligned closely with AFP, is had been reporting on the first 3 quarters of the year. They tend to come out with their data. I think we should be hearing it soon for Q4 of 2023. The Giving Institute, by the way, they usually come out with their data in the summertime. So we won't see their 2023 data until probably this summer. Fundraising Effectiveness Project, hopefully we'll see what they finished up with. And then, of course, I'm going to show you the Fundraising Report Card data that we have. It's always real time. We don't need to wait to report on it. So Fundraising Effectiveness Project was finding that in the first 3 quarters, the giving was down in 2023. And I suspect that others, when the Giving Institute comes out with it, they'll show that not only was giving down in 2022, but that it will have been down in 2023 entirely. However, Q4, looking at Fundraising Effectiveness Project numbers, Q4 is usually the biggest giving quarter. So maybe we made up some gains, but we would have had to equal what happened the prior year and surpass it in order to make up for the 1.1% decline they had been seeing so far. What's more concerning is that they had seen up until that point, those first 3 quarters, drop in donors by 7.6%, which is a huge, huge drop. And again, it could be that an enormous number of people just weren't giving in the first 3 quarters, but that they would give in the fourth quarter. So maybe it's not going to be that big of a drop for the whole entirety of 2023. But I am predicting that the total drop in number of people giving as a whole is continuing its slow creeping decline. Now, it's important to remember that charitable giving has only declined 3 other times, now 4 in 2022, and I predict it will go down again in 2023 when all the full numbers come out. So we're looking at maybe 3 to 5 times in a 40-year history. Generally, giving has tracked with the growth of the GDP. It's just that a lot of our GDP growth now is based on printed money, money that was flooded thanks to the government and due to COVID. So when we put money in the market, that is included in the GDP as far as I understand. And also, COVID actually bolstered generosity. It created 2 years of generosity. It was funny, not so funny when COVID started, but I remember hosting a webinar encouraging folks to not be too afraid, because generally emergencies inspire people to give. So, and that did hold true, and that's what we saw. Now, what's interesting about all this is, so we're seeing a decline in giving, and we're seeing people drop out of giving entirely. But meanwhile, companies, and just Starbucks as an example, their revenues are continuing to climb. So I use that as an example because, people, when they're making a decision about whether to spend $5 or $8 or more, their go-to is not to give it away to help your causes, but rather to buy a cup of coffee. So there's something in this like value proposition, is that people are gaining more satisfaction from a cup of coffee than from giving. And that's something we really want to think about, and think about how we're providing better donor experiences that surpass the cost of the gift. That'll be a theme that we'll come back to later. So, quick poll, and I don't know if Trisha, if you can launch this for me, would be great, but otherwise there we go. Compared to 5 years ago, I just want to see how y'all are feeling about this. Are you feeling that fewer people are donating? This is not scientific study. It's just, I want to get it says host and panels. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad I can't vote. So yeah, go ahead and fill that out, and I'll give you another 5 seconds, and then we'll take a look at the results. So Trisha, if you wouldn't mind, please sharing the results in 3, 2, get your votes in 1. Let's see what people think. Do you feel fewer people are donating? All right, so a little bit split there. A little bit split. Definitely not. 16%. Good. Good for you. If you're at those kinds of organizations that are having that kind of success, that's awesome. All right, cool. All right, so let's continue. So if the data is right, and on average, and I know some of you might not be experiencing this, but if on average fewer people are donating according to the data, or they're reducing their giving, the question is why? I'm going to tell you from researching this and really looking out into the field and understanding there's some demographic reasons, but there's more so psychographic reasons, and I'll go through them here, so to speak. There's really 3 big ones, and then I'm going to pile on with some other points. But one of the key factors is the decline in religiosity. Okay, so it used to be, and this is an older chart from Gallup, showing the percent of people who stated that they had no religion. And this is important because religion, we've found from studies, it's the more likely a person is to have religion, the more likely they are to give to charity of any kind. Part of that's because of tithing, of course, but these religious dictates really help drive giving. So looking at a more updated chart on this, Pew did some research and found that it actually increased to 29% of adults by 2021 felt that they had no religion. And then Giving Institute helped out with that too. But this is a little different, 29%. This is looking at how much of the pie, the total pie of giving, has been given to religious causes. And way back in the 80s, it was 53% of the total pie went to religious causes, and now it's only 29%. And in fact, oh, okay, yeah, they gave us new data, in fact, in 2022 that said it dropped to 27%. It's still by far the largest recipient of giving in terms of categories, but almost a 50% decline in just under 40 years. If you're in that part of the sector, that category, I'm assuming that you're facing some concerns. Another reason why people are giving less or dropping out of giving is, and I don't mean this in the purest form of socialism, but the general idea that, well, maybe the government should just handle all this stuff. And, you know, those of you who work for nonprofits should actually just be folded into the government, or at least the government should dispense of the money and spread it around. Um, I'm not going to get into the politics of this. I'm just going to say that generationally, the younger generation is more accepting of this. And you see this in Europe, in a lot of countries in Europe, is that the 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 countries that are more socialist have less philanthropy. So capitalism is a big part of philanthropy. And as generations change and have different attitudes, and maybe this will change when they get older, but we're seeing, for instance, like the millennials are actually coming down to sort of where or the millennials and Gen Zers are kind of coming down more, being less in favor of capitalism and more in favor of socialism. The Gen Xers are kind of holding strong, and so are the baby boomers. But this doesn't bode well unless these folks change their minds as they get older, which I'm kind of not sure that's going to happen. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Number three out of the three big reasons, and this is the biggest reason I believe, is that there's a decline in trust. So the independent sector conducted a study and found that high trust is correlated with robust giving and volunteering. That's just been found. Thank you, independent sector. But let's go backwards a few years. In 2017, a study came out from give.org in association with the Better Business Bureau, asking if folks trusted charities today, and that was in 2017, more or less are the same as they did 5 years ago. And what they found was that only 10% of the respondents felt that they trusted charities more, and 32% said less, 58% said the same. What was even most concerning is back then they asked, do you feel that your trust might improve over time? And very few felt that way. And we're seeing that play out nowadays. It's fairly well entrenched now. I don't know if you've all heard of the Edelman Trust Barometer, but they have an amazing research on how people feel about all kinds of institutions, including the media, the government, private sector business, and nonprofits. And they especially, of course, help us understand how people are feeling with regard to trust worthiness of nonprofits. In 2018, they found a striking 9% drop in trust from that year to the prior year to that year. What was most concerning was that they saw a 23% drop in trust among the informed public. And those are going to tend to be your high net worth donors. So that's a very disconcerting data point. And they also found that the trust in nonprofits was surpassed by trust in business. And that was the first time that happened in 2018, and it has maintained and continued on that path. Now, to be fair, I think that this is buoyed or weighted because people tend to trust small business owners. And if they work for a small business, they actually know the owner and such. So maybe that has something to do with it. I'm not, maybe it's also that more people are becoming business owners as we have this, contractor type freelancer economy. So maybe they trust themselves. I'm not exactly sure what to read into it, but the data is what it is. People are saying that they trust business more than NGOs for the first time. Yeah, and I guess it's good to keep in mind that, well, uh, NGOs still score higher than the government and the media. So those are the least trusted uh, entities or sectors. Now, let's follow that up with the Independent Sector 2023 study on trust in civil society, where what they said that trust in nonprofits is sinking. After seeing years of small trust declines in line with other major institutions, nonprofit trust dropped by a statistically significant 4 points in 2023, which they said was the largest year-over-year change in trust of any institution tested. Yeah, this is a concern. Trust in nonprofits is not only because of maybe negative news reports or maybe a CEO with their getting their hand caught in the kitty. That it's, I believe, in part because of the way that we treat donors and prospective donors. The highly solicitous and transactional nature is driving distrust, and I'll get into more on that in a little bit. Now, to pile on to those three big points, competition for for donor dollars is increasing. It's not just Starbucks. Um, Look, you have competitors among yourselves. Other charities are competing for the same donors. Most donors give to a variety of causes, and they have to decide, do I give more to this one or more to that one and a little less to this one? The data shows that there used to only be, back in the late 80s, 500,000 nonprofits, 501c3 public charities. Now there's closer to 1.8, 1.9, almost 2 million, depending on how you look at it. So I just went to the IRS site, and I know this is super tiny, but are cemetery companies really competing? I don't know how many dollars they're really taking away from you. So you could look at this data and say, well, let's split the difference and just say it's about 1.8, 1.9 million. It's still quite a lot of competition. Keep in mind that you can pretty much start a charity right on your kitchen table, kitchen counter with a couple of friends. You could do it, just go to LegalZoom.com and click that button, start my nonprofit, boom, and away you go. You start collecting donations. I don't think it's entirely, cool to do it that way. I think there's a lot more to it, but it's how a lot of these get started. Now, Dr. Russell James, who's my good pal, I'm really grateful for our relationship over the years. He wrote a series of books called the Fundraising Myth and Science series. It is free. We offer it. It's on the top left side of our main website at iMarketSmart.com. You can get those there. What Dr. James says in those books is that your ultimate competitor is really not other charities and not Starbucks, but it's the private family foundation. And he especially mentioned that 2/3 of charitable bequest dollars now go to private foundations. Think about that, 2/3. That's just a whopping figure. Piling on to that is the growth in donor advised funds, which we all know are growing substantially. So they're outpacing the growth in private foundations. There are, well, just 5 years, 6 years ago, there were only 400,000 plus, and now there's almost 2 million. So we've got a big growth of accounts that are giving to donor advised funds. And now they've grown in that period of time in assets by 2x. This is really kind of a detour for your donors. And it's because these banks have figured out how to provide a value proposition that helps donors get more out of their giving. I mean, they get a double dose of dopamine. They get a dose when they give it to their donor advised fund or their foundation. And then again, when they finally make the final transaction or giving it to the final resting home for their money. So that's not the only benefit. Of course, there's the tax write-off that you get immediately and such. But I think they also just enjoy the experience. I know I do. I have a donor advised fund. I just find it convenient and easy, and it allows me to sort of budget for my giving in a certain way. So people like these, they're not going to go away pending maybe unless there's some kind of legislation, but the public likes them. And that is your ultimate competitor. All right, so let's get into the analytics that we get from my fundraising report card, which again is a free tool. I built it for the sector. Gosh, 8 years ago. We are going to rebuild it. It's getting a little glitchy, and we've been putting money into other things. So we're gonna go ahead and put some money into it and rebuild it for you. However, there might be a monetization. In other words, we might start charging for it. I would say that if you want to see your data compared to these benchmarks, then you really should go over there and upload your data soon before it'll probably be the summer or the fall when we start to charge for it in some way. We haven't decided how we're going to do that yet, but I would make good use out of the free product for as long as it remains that way. It's very easy. You just need to put in 3 data points, anonymous. We don't need to know anybody's names or anything. So you just need a donor ID, the date of each gift, and the amount of each gift, and you'll be able to put those in there. All right, so here's the data that we're seeing. And if you've been in this presentation annually, you may have recognized these kinds of charts. But the revenue retention, this isn't donor retention. This is how much revenue you're retaining from year to year. And that's been on the decline. Back in 2019, you needed to replace about 40% of your revenue each year. And now that has grown to, on average, you need to replace about almost 60% of your revenue in order to just keep your head above water and just keep the status quo. When it comes to number of people, number of donors that are retained, that's been a little bit bumpy, but it's generally on the downward trend. It used to be near 40% back in 2019, and now it's just around 35%. So that means that each year, well, back in 2019, you had to backfill 60% of your donors. Now you need to backfill 65%. Okay. Now, for comparison's sake, Customer Gauge did some research on this to see what the retention rates are for other industries. And for instance, computer software, I mean, that's essentially where MarketSmart lies. And they're pretty right. I mean, that's almost where we are as far as customer retention goes. In fact, we get really kind of pretty upset and down on ourselves when we lose even one customer. So it's interesting that most industries have such higher retention rates than our sector. That takes us to the average donation amount, which was the most striking figure decline that I kind of got me out of my seat, is that the average donation amount, this isn't total for the year, but the average across the board of a single donation was headed down. by 8.5% compared to last year. So keep in mind, though, that inflation was increasing. So although it's down 8.5%, it's actually going to hurt a little bit more than that because of inflation. All right. So I believe that the wealthiest donors are I think first we saw a lot of low dollar donors really dropping out fast. But now I think we're just starting to see wealthy donors are giving less, or it's really just that they're giving to your ultimate competitors, which are the DAFs and the foundations. All right, so let's look at this another way, and then we're going to cut it up like maybe two other ways to take a look at it. First-time donor retention is heading on its way down, 23%, almost 24% in 2019. Now it's below 20%. That's the first time that I've seen that number. And in fact, well, here, I'll get to that other figure. Reactivated donor retention. These are the reactivated donors from last year who renewed again this year. Has dropped from 43% to almost 36%. And repeat donor retention, these are the retained donors who then renewed it yet again, has been dropping as well. So let's carve this up by giving amount. Let's look at low dollar donors versus high dollar donors. It gets really interesting when we do that. And over time, let's look at the under $100 donors, because back in 2020, we were at about 23% retention rate. And now early in this year, we saw that it's even dropped down below 20%. Now it's at about 17%. I'd have to check. And by the way, their benchmarks are live. They're on our site on the fundraisingreportcard.com/benchmarks. You can go look at them today. I bet it's somewhere around 17%. We'd have to go take a look. The over $5,000 donors, though, are retaining at a very stable number. It's pretty much been 37%. Almost 38% now. So it's actually increasing a little bit for the over $5,000 donation donors. In fact, look at that. It's, if you look at January of 2024, it was 17%. I mean, it's more than double the retention rate for the larger dollar donors, which kind of makes sense. They probably get a more valuable, more VIP level experience, I'm sure. So that's going to help with retention. Now, let's put these side to side, the $100 donors versus the $5,000 donors. And we were just talking about the donor retention rate being higher for the larger dollar donors. But look at that with the average donation amount. I mean, the average donation is just 27 bucks, while for the low dollar donors and for the over $5,000 donors, it's almost $30,000. And the lifetime value, which frankly, I think is the key metric that all of us should be looking at all the time, is just 46 bucks compared to $77,000. And that doesn't even include legacy gifts, which of course, legacy gifts from high dollar donors are more likely to be much, much bigger on average. So it kind of begs the question of like, wow, where are we spending our time and where are we spending our fundraising money? I mean, the 80-20, what used to be the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, people would say, well, we get 80% of our revenue from 20% of our donors, something like that. It's really now you get 68% of your revenue on average from less than 1%, 0.77% of your donors. So let's look at it this way. Donors giving over $5,000 equal 0.77% of an organization's donor base, but make up almost, well, 60s, almost 69%, just over 2/3 of all donation revenue for an organization. Meanwhile, the donors giving under $100 equal 76% of an organization's donor base, but make up only 6% of all the donation revenue. So focusing on the masses with mass marketing is what I call populist fundraising, which is actually very successful in politics, because essentially a dollar given in politics is almost like a vote. You know, it's 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 not. I don't think it's as important in other fundraising areas anymore. And this begs the question, it's almost an ethical question, perhaps, about the democratization of giving, which is important too. However, if we need to keep the lights on, or if we really want to grow and make bigger impact, I would say that perhaps we should consider doing a little less of the mass market populist fundraising and do a little more to provide a high value donor experience, especially for the people who are capable of making the most impact for others and for the beneficiaries you serve. That I'm getting onto my soapbox, which I'll get onto a little bit more later. But there's a challenge for your in-house teams because, so, you know, if you're going to go the populist approach, it's harder for them than it ever has been. There's more channels for them to try to use to get to donors. And there's, of course, even the charity watchdogs and everything now. But donor preferences are really changing. It's not about how many channels you use or how many mailers you send out. In fact, people really don't like interruptive, highly solicitous, transactional fundraising as much as they once did. They're becoming less and less accepting of it. And I even hear fundraisers, I mean, admitting that they don't like it. They don't like getting this stuff at home as much as they used to give it more of a pass. But it's the preferences of our society are changing, and I'm concerned that the sector is not moving in lockstep with what the donors really want. Some will say that the donors are actually kind of fed up. Some of them are fed up with the transactional, solicitous nature of some of these crass kind of messages. What they want is they want to be treated fairly, respectfully. They want to have a degree of control over the timing of when they're engaged. They want to be asked for permission to opt in, not just to marketing, but to opt into a relationship with a gift officer, perhaps. I mean, um, it's never made sense to me how we assign donors for caseloads without asking the donor if they would like to be in the donor in the fundraiser's caseload. Just never made sense to me as a donor, and that's why I got into this whole thing in the first place and started building technology, is because of a bad donor experience that I had. Um, they want to be able to opt in and opt out, self-navigate their own decision-making process, and they want to have convenience. They want to do things when they want to do it. So if they want to research giving at 2 in the morning, then they should be able to do it. It's up to them, and we should help them with that. In some, what we want to do is provide people with a high value engagement experience with our causes. That's what they want. They want to connect their life story with your cause. They want to make sure that their values and your organization's values align, and they want to make sure that they feel a sense of belonging or a sense of community for having helped someone like them or someone that they feel that they care about. This all gets computed in their minds, not really intentionally, but they're always weighing the value of their engagement experience with your organization. And they can give to many causes that compete with your particular organization. People care more about causes than they care about particular entities at this time. That's a preference that's just kind of changing. So people are ready, or I'm sorry, people want to tell you when they're ready for outreach, when they, especially when it comes to major gifts. People want to let you know, yeah, now I'm ready. It's kind of like when you buy a car. I mean, you're not going to buy a car because somebody called you up and invited you to consider buying a car. You're going to buy a new car when you feel you're ready because your old one's breaking down or you need something bigger or something changed in your life, right? So timing and where people reside in their consideration process is something that we haven't really paid to enough attention to in the sector. It's kind of been more about, well, we'll solicit them when we're ready, and we'll put them in a caseload when we, the organization, decide that they should be in a caseload, rather than inviting these supporters to let you know when they feel they're ready. So I think that's a key point that we want to pay attention to. As I wrote years ago, hounding a donor for attention or action before they're ready will only annoy and burn bridges. And you'd feel the same way too. Just like I said with that car purchase example, nobody likes being hounded when they're not ready, but they do like being supported to help them become ready. So enough with the doom and gloom, right? Competition's increasing, fewer people are giving, and average gift amount is decreasing. Trust is declining, fraction of the donor base making up a majority of the revenue. Channels are fragmenting, making it harder for your in-house teams. And preferences are changing, especially because in-house teams don't know, for the most part, when people are ready, especially the major gifts folks. Um, Elizabeth Boris wrote when she was the chair of the Giving USA, giving's increasing because of larger gifts from richer donors. The smaller donors, a mid-level, are slowly but surely disappearing across the board among all organizations. Of course, this doesn't factor in the people that voted and said that they're not seeing it. Kudos. But a lot of folks are reporting on this now. Brian Lauterbach wrote, nonprofits in the US are being challenged by all of these different factors outside of their control, and most organizations find themselves flat-footed and unable to easily adapt. This is a key point because it is time for organizations to pivot and think about how they're going to react to this fundraising climate change. So let's do another quick poll and see, do you believe that this fundraising climate change I've been talking about is real? Give me a quick yes or no. It's okay if you feel no. I'm only going to give you about 15 seconds, maybe less, 10, 9, maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see what we got, Trish. Yeah. Okay, we've got some believers, a lot more believers than we have in years past. All right, cool. Thank you very much. I'll close that out. All right, so let's get to the part of what we should do about it. And then I'll be taking questions right after I give you the 1-2 at the top of the hour about what MarketSmart does. Um, so what should we do? Should we do more of everything? More direct mail, even though postage prices and printing are going up? More email? Did the emails even get through? More events? Or maybe we could trade one of those events that's not really everybody's enjoying as much as they used to and do something different, you know? So I don't think more of everything is the answer. And I think that there are going to be a lot of winners, but also many more losers in the coming months and coming years who don't adapt. I mean, you could kind of use an analogy by looking at Encyclopedia Britannica and what happened, to them, and now it's essentially replaced by Wikipedia. And the same with the taxi cabs. I mean, they're still around, but we all know about Uber now. And then the worst story is really like Blockbuster. I mean, nobody's going to get a video anymore. We all go to things like Netflix, right? So we've got to adapt. I posit to you that the way to adapt is by leveraging technology to improve the engagement experience, to make it a more valuable engagement experience for each supporter. The winners will do this, and they will actually cut costs at the same time because technology is an equalizer and a cost cutter. and they'll be able to sort of surf past the fundraising climate change storms. We're seeing it with our customers, and hopefully many of you are on this call. It ends up being a challenge for board and leadership to get their head around. But once they do, because they kind of get addicted to the transactional right now nature of the low dollar hamster wheel, if you will. It's really nice to see that the letter went out and the money came in, and all they had to do was kind of sign a purchase order for the most part. I mean, that's a lot easier than meeting with 100 high capacity donors several times over 2, 3, 4 years, right? It's just easier. But once you get your head around it and people believe in it and see the exponential results of leveraging technology for engagement, you end up with, frankly, making everybody happy: the board, the leadership, the fundraisers, and especially the donors. So what you can do about it is not a quick fix. It's not convenient. It's not easy. And that's why a lot of people won't do it. But if your competition won't do it and you will, and your organization will, you're going to win out. So what I mean by that is you kind of have to think beyond the traditional interruptive, transactional, arm's length approaches that are focused mostly on small gifts, and instead kind of try to be the tortoise instead of the hare. Okay, you want a contemporary, tech-enabled, supportive, not solicitous approach that delivers value for each donor. And remember that value is in the eye of the beholder. So you have to understand what each donor wants in order to deliver value for them in line with their timing. Okay, remember the value proposition people are looking for in these changing times. So the first strategy I recommend for combating fundraising climate change is focusing on this 0.77% of your database that provides 68% of the revenue. So usually when we look at how budgets are assigned, interestingly, most of the budget is spent on the low dollar and the transactional and the mass marketing, while less and frankly, I think more should be spent on supporting major gifts, mid-level migration, and technology enablement for providing value at scale, not solicitation, at scale. If you provide more value, people will reciprocate by giving more. So some ways that you could do this that are easy and low cost is you can actually find new major donors through referrals. Now, we do this as part of our technology system. It's baked in, where we ask our customers, supporters, if they have any friends or colleagues that would be interested in your mission. And then the supporters, through our survey system, just let us know, yeah, I do. And especially if they're a high capacity person or already a major donor, then give them the option to make a personal introduction for you, or to just get information from you that they can pass on. But these referrals are powerful. And you can even put a little survey like this in just a board packet just to start and see if you can get referrals. Now, you have to be careful with pressuring your board about referrals, because there's I could probably do a whole webinar just on that, but it's a very soft approach here, just to put it in the board packets. Another area to focus on, that's part of this 0.77% cohort, are your volunteers. Now, the Bank of America study, if any of you are familiar with this, on high net worth philanthropy, found back in 2016 that they're sort of like right under your wings. For some of you, they may be in your building right now, in fact. So you want to focus on them. They're in your midst, and they're kind of testing you because they're volunteering for several organizations and they want to give. I mean, 84% back in 2016 said that they give. Now, in the 2023 data, what they found was that they weren't in your midst as much. You could see it went down to 36%, but I think that's really because of COVID. So I think that's going to bounce back up. Whether they're testing you, yeah. Now they say that only 46% give to two or more organizations. That again might be because of COVID. Here's the big point for this one is that they want to give, and they give. The 2023 report said that they give 350% more than non-volunteers. So if you're not engaging with your volunteers about higher level of giving, I recommend that you do that. Another way you can engage with them with high value donors is actually through Facebook. We actually do this, but I thought I'd better find somebody else. And so I'm not only promoting MarketSmart. So I put in BWF case study on how they just searched on Facebook using their demographics tools and advertised to get people that fit their demographics that they needed and were close to a certain organization's operation, and asked them to sign up for a newsletter, sign up for value, for engagement, for cultivation. And they got 43 people to do it that fit that mold. And that's just really powerful. And we do similar things for our customers. So you could do that at low cost. Next is you want to support your supporters, okay? It's not about soliciting your supporters as much as it's about supporting them by understanding who they are, why they care, and where, especially where they are in the consideration continuum. This is all qualitative data. I know that we're all kind of, it's quite easy and addicting to be focused on wealth screening and predictive analytics, and that's all fine and good. But what really moves the needle is understanding the qualitative data instead of that quantitative data. Focusing on these folks and their needs, especially where they are in their consideration continuum. You don't need to do that so much with low dollar impulse oriented decisions. You could just send the letter and it doesn't really matter. Or it's impossible, frankly, to know whether someone's ready to give. But for high dollar, highly considered decisions, if you engage with people properly over time, they will signal to you when the timing is right. We break this into a why, how, and why kind of stages. And just keep in mind that people go through this process. They actually, it's more of a why, what, how. It's like, why do I care about this cause? People want to recollect. And what would I want to give to, assuming that you allow unrestricted giving, or I'm sorry, restricted giving. And then how do I want to do that? What tools will I use? So you need to learn about them, learn who inspired them, what are their interests, their needs, and especially, is the timing right for them? Of course, this is a little bit biased because I invented this donor survey technology almost 15 years ago. And now a lot of people do surveys, but it's really not about surveying people. It's about engaging with people and learning about what they need and why. If you don't really want to employ our system, you could learn how to do a donor survey on your own. Just be very, very careful, because if you don't follow up with people after taking a survey, they actually give less. So you have to have a follow-up plan in place. All right, so the third point is being reciprocal. Using the law of reciprocity is very powerful. You want to give to your givers. One idea I give to everybody, if you're especially at a college or university, is why not start off the relationship not by asking for an appointment and to update people on the school, which nobody really wants that much. Start it off by just saying, hey, I've got an old digital version of your yearbook. How about it? Do you want it? I'm happy to send it to you. Happy to share it with you. You know, that's a good one. One that's part of our system that I think you might like, and frankly gets more engagement, is something that we call a tell your story effort, where we invite donors to tell all that information. It's really like donor discovery information that they just like feed you right into a digital tool, and then they allow you to share it online or in social media. And this is great for other donors to see. So this is actually a great gift. People love to tell their story, even if it's on a digital tool. We see it all the time. So we recommend giving to your givers. So those are my three recommendations, and they work. I promise you, they work. That's the end of the presentation for now, but I hope you'll stick around. I'm going to take questions in just a couple minutes, right after I explain to you, if you are interested, how MarketSmart can help you and your organization. So if you're curious, what we do, we're really a turnkey, done for you marketing support system, right? We're outsourced. We help you focus primarily on raising major and legacy gifts. And when you do that with this kind of system, it actually helps all boats rise. Even the low dollar donors will give more. Here's just one case study. The yellow bars are the people who engaged with MarketSmart's system, which is non-solicitous, believe it or not, without solicitation, but with engagement and value delivery. People at the low end gave 253% more than those who were not engaged by our system, but were regularly just solicited the old way. And of course, at the high end, you could see we almost doubled the revenue compared to the other cohort. So it's powerful. It's actually a less is more. It's not about solicitation. It's all about support and delivering value is what we do. And it comes with a 10-to-1 ROI guarantee, so there's no risk. If we don't generate 10 times what it costs to invest in our system, we'll give you your money back. I will say we have never, ever had to give anybody their money back because our system always works. But it will help you fear less, I guess, trying out something new. You can learn everything that we do in our book, and we'll give it away for free. The book I wrote is Engagement Fundraising. It describes exactly what we do and how to do it. The only thing is that then you'd probably need to spend $100,000 or several $100,000 to build it out, while you could essentially outsource it to us for less than the price of a even one staff member. Okay, so here's a little bit more about how it works. Is just think of this, is that the traditional way that major gifts are assigned is that we'll do some prospect research and quantitative RFM, well screening and such, and we'll assign folks to caseloads without a donor's permission. And then the gift officer has to run around and try and get a meeting in order to qualify the person fully. And the data research shows that only about 1/3 of the donors that are assigned are found by the gift officers to be truly qualified. So 2/3 are resulting in false positives that are leading people on wild goose chases. They're wasting fundraiser time. They're annoying some prospects who didn't want to be in a caseload. And it just costs a lot of money and a lot of time. All the while, gift officers are often getting leads or referrals and finding that the people that weren't assigned, some of them are giving at a high rate. So that's kind of a head scratcher. And that's where we come in with this modernized donor-driven engagement fundraising system that helps everybody win. It's using the qualitative data supplied by the donors, and then it automates cultivation through our technology to help them warm themselves up and self-qualify by giving them a better giving experience that's non-solicitous and only value-oriented. This makes your operation exponentially more efficient, more effective, more revenue at lower cost, and you have less staff turnover. It does require a tortoise beats the hare kind of mentality, where the preliminary qualification has to be injected into your operation. And that adds a step to the process, but it's all done by our technology because it ends up showing you who has self-qualified, who said that they're ready for your outreach. And in many cases, if you allow us, we'll even compel folks to set their own appointments with you right on your calendar. So you don't have to make the calls and do that. It's because it engages people with the right messages at the right times. in order to help them get into your caseload by opting into it. So again, it's turnkey, done for you, 10-to-1 ROI offer. And there's, we actually aim for 100-to-1 ROI. This nice young lady, Jonelle, got, well, she felt she was at 60-to-1 before she even really got deep into the data because she closed big gifts quick. And Debbie, if you're on the call, thank you for your quote. Amazing results, great price. And then there's, oh yeah, hi Cheryl, yeah. People are reaching out to me instead of the other way around. How refreshing is that? So that's what we do at MarketSmart. It's, well, here, I'll give you the real quick, is it's composed of a survey, automation, email, microsite. This helps people move themselves through the consideration process until such time that they reveal themselves in your dashboard and essentially say they're ready to meet. And don't worry, we have staff that hold your hand through this all the time. We don't want you to have to operate software. All you need to do is look in there to see who you should make outreach for. So, all right. Thank you for staying on. I'm going to answer questions now. Although, oh yeah, you can consider an opportunity analysis. We can tell you what ROI we think you're going to get from us, and that's at no cost. Just give us a ring or email us or sign up for a demo, and we'll work on that for you for free. All right, so time for questions. I see some of them went into the chat as well, but I'll start in the Q&A area. Thank you very much. Christopher, all right, that's my buddy. Very insightful. Thank you. Are our clients and customers C3s or also C4s? I think we have some C4s. It's mostly C3s, but we do have some C4s. So thanks for that question, Mary. We fill our pipelines, this is Sherry. We fill our pipeline of major gifts with people who have given small gifts a couple of times. How do you suggest filling the pipeline if we no longer doing populist fundraising? Yeah, well, a couple of the ways that I mentioned before, Sherry, but really the key of what you want to do is you want to survey pretty much any donor. Unless you already know who's, I would start with some RFM, for instance, like who's most recently given, most frequently given, and the highest dollar amount, monetary amount. Start with something like that and just start to survey people. But only do like maybe 50 or 100 surveys, because you might be surprised and alarmed by the response rate. And you want to make sure that you always follow up on every single survey response. If you don't, that's one of the problems of a lot of people really got enamored by us and our survey methodology. And so like a lot of consultants started selling surveys, but they weren't selling automated cultivation. And what we found from looking at when they finally became customers, we looked at their data and we saw that these folks, they were actually hurting themselves, because if you survey people without follow-up, then people don't feel heard. They feel like they wasted their time and they feel like nothing changed. They tried to help, but you didn't listen. So you've got to follow up with people. And but I just highly encourage you to get that report, Sherry, and start surveying folks to find out which among those, even the low dollar donors or the high RFM donors, are ready for your outreach and maybe want to be in a caseload and work with you on a major gift. Okay, I'm going to go back down to the bottom. Let's see, can physical mail still be effective for deepening engagement? Oh yeah. Okay, so just making sure, anonymous attendee, I am not against direct mail. I'm just against direct mail that's overly solicitous and replete of value. Okay, donors, supporters want value in every engagement, in every touch. Physical mail can be highly beneficial for people who have already told you their preferences and interests. I mean, frankly, a newsletter is one of the most effective tools, but it should be it should be value oriented. They usually tend to be very braggadocious, and you want your newsletter to provide value, help people understand how you're using their money, and let them know, speak in terms of your gift did this, not we and our program staff did this. It's not about that. If you're talking to a donor, you want to make sure that they understand that their contributions moved the needle. So direct mail, yes, absolutely. Just I think direct mail should be done smaller lists and more targeted, more personalized. What do you recommend from Ashley? What do you recommend as a follow-up to people who completed a survey? Yeah, well, first follow-up, Ashley, is to just let them know that you heard and that you listened. So show them that you know them. Respond saying, I heard you. I heard that you graduated from here and you had such a great, Professor so-and-so changed your life. Thank you for sharing that. And then the cultivation follow-up is actually more simple. Um, People are really crazy about donor journeys, and they actually kind of don't work. You got to be careful with donor journeys for major gifts. They kind of work for events and stuff. Sure, it's just a short thing, but they don't work for major gifts. You can't predict the donor journey. Their timing is their own. So the follow-up needs to just be value oriented in line with what they say that is their consideration stage. So if they're at the why should I give stage of the consideration continuum, Sherry, you want to give them offers like for instance, that tell your story offer is perfect for people in the why stage. But people who are more interested in the what stage might be more interested in looking at your case for support or your plans for the new building or what programs you're thinking of putting together. And then finally, people who are in the how stage, they might be more interested in like a giving seminar or webinar on how to give wisely and tax efficiently. So it's more about a constant drumbeat of value given to people in order to really spur the law of reciprocity and show people that you care about them, not their money. One thing you want to avoid with cultivation is anything that's solicitous. Like I would refrain in most cases from how types of cultivation messages. Don't keep asking people like, are you ready to give? Are you ready to give? Are you ready to give? That's not it. Instead, offer them why offers and what offers, but also give them an off ramp, so to speak, to show you that they're ready for deeper engagement and maybe want to meet with somebody one-to-one, a facilitator. Okay, so how does MarketSmart work with CRMs? It's very simple. I mean, we can integrate or frankly, our system works kind of as a satellite for pre-qualification. So you could pull a list or we could do an integration. You could pull it the old-fashioned way or we could do the integration. Okay, Daphne says, I'm not wealthy. Where do I find the wealthy individuals to have conversations? Yeah, that's a great question. I get it. You don't hang out at the watering holes where the wealthy hang out. But this again, you'll find them if you engage them and offer them value. You won't have to find them, they'll come to you. They'll come to you like, think of value and offers like, for lack of a better word, like a worm on a hook. If you put the worm on the hook in the water, the fish will come to it if it's a good worm. So you've got to create offers. Again, we have 8 of these such offers that are productized and turnkey, so we can spin them up really fast and get them out the door, like that tell your story effort. But again, Daphne, you should start with a survey and start slow. 50 to 100, maybe 500 or 1,000. Start slow, and the wealthy ones will show themselves in the survey if you ask the right questions and ask them in the right way. And that's why I created that report to help folks with that. All right, so Greg, what would happen if the philanthropic sector converted to a blank whiteboard concept, meaning let the donor use words, pictures, or symbols to share how they want to be engaged? And I believe this can be done. Yeah. Um, well, I mean, thank you. That's essentially what we've been developing here at MarketSmart. It's not a whiteboard, it's an engagement process that's done through the science that we learned, thankfully, from me as being a donor and essentially a behavioral scientist who's been involved in marketing since I was a kid, but also through the help with Dr. Russell James. And I'm very appreciative also to a wonderful man here in Maryland that lives not too far away. I don't know if he's on the call, named Jim Langley. Any of his like 20 some odd books, if you get and read, will be helpful. But yeah, I mean, that's what we do. So scrolling up, there's a lot of questions. Thank you. And keep them coming. I'll stay on as long as you all want. So could some of the $100 donors be related to special events, galas, memorial gifts, and such? Absolutely. Absolutely. Any of those low dollar gifts, Kelly, um, I just consider them transactional. They're generally transactional gifts as opposed to relational gifts. All right, trust will position nonprofits as beneficiaries of donor advised funds. All right, sorry, Mike. I love you, man. I know you. I love you, but I don't understand the question. So I might need you to restate that one. How relevant do you think these trends are to Canadian charities? Have you looked at Canadian data and do you foresee a similar forecast? I do. I do think I haven't looked at the Canadian data, but I would figure that the same is happening, and it may even be escalating more in Canada because of I would say Canada has a mindset that's closer to the Europeans than it is to the American capitalist. It's been skewing a little bit more to the socialist, if you don't mind me saying. God, I hope I don't get into a political fight. I'm not a politician. I don't know. So, but that's my gut. So Mike's just saying, okay, Mike was just saying trust is vital. Thanks for the comment, Mike. Oh, here it is. Wondering if research is taking a look back on giving in terms of type, community giving, and philanthropic giving. Community and philanthropy. During the Great Depression, overall giving was significantly high when factoring in community giving. Yeah, I honestly, Mike, I love this, but I don't know. That's too far back for me. Starbucks has been declining since 2020. I know that graph only goes, oh, thank you, anonymous attendee. I did not know that. All right, well, maybe I should have put in the coffee industry as a whole because, yeah, thanks for that. All right, George, let's see here. All right. Any tips for moving a risk-averse organization from a transactional approach to stewardship, reporting back on funds? Yeah. Well, they say that people don't change unless they're in pain. So I hate to say that because risk-averse organizations then usually wait. It's kind of like the person who waits on the ship of, the deck of the Titanic, and they wait and wait and wait, hoping that they won't have to go into the water until finally the whole ship is submerged and it's like over. The greatest tip, though, that I can give you is that competition is usually a great motivator. So I would say that aside from just yelling and screaming at people and maybe giving them this presentation, I would recommend for a risk averse board or leadership is pointing out to them how much money is going to these donor advised funds and foundations, and that you have a share in that wealth if you put a little more emphasis on focusing on the wealthy and how much value you can give to them rather than sort of sniffing your stuff, your noses at them saying, I don't want to get my hands dirty. I don't want to talk to them. I mean, it could be a big problem if they're not just risk averse, but if they actually don't like wealthy human beings. You know, if that's the case, you might need to just go to another organization. You know, like we got to love everybody, rich, poor, middle class. So, but citing competition usually gets competitive leaders and competitive people off the dime. So that's my big recommendation for you on that. Do you think the increased standard deduction is playing into this, even though half of the people didn't itemize? It really could be. It's hard to correlate that exactly. And research causation, correlation. I don't know, but I really I think it very well could be playing into that, especially for the lower dollar donors. Yes, Amy. I mean, the high dollar donors have always been uh, yeah, I that could play a part in it. Sorry, I don't have an exact answer. This year, I have set aside 5 tables for my organization's upcoming gala, and I intend to offer them to individuals who've been longtime supporters so they could fill them with individuals that might be interested in the organization's mission. I've substituted one transactional approach for another. Yeah, I mean, that might work. Um, that might work. It is still, it all depends. You're talking about getting people off the dime and out of their houses and all dressed up to go to an event where the value they may be really getting out of it is to scratch their buddy's back because she came to your gala. So now you're going to her table at her gala, and they don't really care about the cause. They're just going quid pro quo. Or it also could be, there's so many reasons. I think what you want to do is replace one transactional approach for a relational approach. Okay. Think about finding a relational approach. I mean, that could be giving people a tour. And this way, people who will get off the dime to go to take a tour are self-qualifying because they would never take a tour of your operation if they didn't care. But they might go to the gala because they want some dinner and dancing and socializing and maybe to make other business networking contacts. See how that works? Got to make the offer align with the cause. And yeah, so I hope that helped you on that. Um, Given that philanthropy by majority wealthy donors continues to skew more towards non-cash gifts, how do you think this is impacting giving and our work? Yeah, well, I think major gift officers need to understand that there are little buckets and there are big buckets. Big buckets hold assets. Assets have sort of a lottery effect. You know, when people have assets, they're like, wow, I have so much, they could give so much. When people look at the little bucket, they're looking at the cash bucket. And that's like, what's in my cash account right now? I mean, as for example, like everybody has a donate now button on their webpage, but not everybody has my DAF widget, which I give away for free. Like it would seem to me that you should put the DAF widget right next to the donate now button. So you have a pathway for under $100 donors or up to $1,000 donors, but you also have a pathway that makes it easy and convenient and reminds people that they have a big bucket because people actually forget and then they give from the little bucket with their credit card and cash rather than giving from their donor advised fund, even though they already set aside the money. And those donor advised fund gifts are always bigger, $5,000, $7,000, much, much greater, exponentially greater than a regular donate now $100 gift, even if it's a monthly gift. So I hope that helped you, Tim. I'm just going to I think I might have missed a couple here, but let's see. Maybe I didn't. There's a couple in the chat. Nope. All right. So I'll give you a few seconds in case anybody has let's see, can you sum up how MarketSmart will support our efforts? Daphne, I think I think that's how I say your name. I'd encourage you to maybe sign up for a demo. I don't know if everybody would want to hear my sales pitch right here. So yeah, feel free to put one more in there unless anybody else has any other questions. Otherwise, this is a wrap for this year. Thank you for staying so long. That was a lot of questions this time. And we'll see you next year. Hopefully the news is better, or hopefully more of you have taken on some more value-oriented, less transactional and more relational approaches. So thank you for this year's fundraising climate change event. We'll see you next year.